Well, welcome to this Integrated Skills Wider Waste webinar. I'm really pleased today. We're joined by Jo Causon, who's the Chief Executive of the Institute of Customer Services. Hi, Jo. Nice to see you.
Really nice to see you, and thank you so much for inviting me today.
No,
Really,
it's
really
an
great to
absolute
be
pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for several months, and apologies to those of you who actually joined us in September on the 22nd and found there was no webinar, that the platform had actually folded. Yep, sincere apologies from Click Meeting, who said it was a glitch, and yeah, it's now fixed. And anyway, we've made connections today, so thanks very much to all of you for joining us. Today's webinar is a 30-minute session with Jo, and we're going to be asking some. Well, I've got a ton of questions, Jo, about customer services to throw at you, and I think webinars work best when they're kind of in a conversation mode. So it's going to be pretty much a conversation. We may come back to stuff as you trigger things for me, and we kind of find things of interest and worthwhile popping into the conversation and coming back to. For those of you who joined us, there's a message portal down there. Please enter your questions and we'll do our best to answer those questions, or Jo will do her best to answer those questions as part of the conversation. I'll hopefully prompt those questions. If we don't get through them all in time, then just to say that Jo has said she's quite happy to have a look at some of those questions and respond by email, and we could circulate those to all of you together with the recording of this webinar. A little bit about Integrated Skills. Who are we? Integrated Skills are providers of waste management technology, and in the main, we're interested in route optimization, in-cab and back office systems. But this has been something that's been brewing for a number of years for me, because increasingly there's a revolution that's taken place, whether we like it or not, in customer services, and a little bit more of that in a second. I'll come back to that, but I just wanted to introduce Jo. A little bit about you, Jo. I'm going to say that you've been at the Institute of over 12 years. 12 years.
Long time.
While you've been there, membership has grown significantly, 150%. So you're obviously doing something right at the Institute of Customer Services, and you've introduced something that I think is of real interest and will be of interest to our attendees today. And hopefully, I can ask you some more about that. But that's your UK Customer Satisfaction Index, really a kind of barometer of what people are, how people are feeling about customer services in the UK. You have worked both commercially in the commercial sector, but also across the not-for-profit and third sector, local authority, public sector. So you've kind of crossed all of those sectors, working at boardroom level, and you had a spell at some well-known organisations, the City and Guilds and the Chartered Management Institute. So you've kind of had a broad range of experience. What I like to when I'm thinking about this, you've actually you're interested particularly on the linkages between where employees meet customer service strategy and organisation performance, and we'll come back to that during the conversation. That's of real interest. You've worked with parliamentarians, officials and regulators, and you've provided advice to public administration select committee inquiries about customer services. So in my view, I really feel like I've got the right person to be speaking to on this subject. So I really appreciate you joining us, so thank you. Just as a bit of an intro to who we are, who the audience is today, we've sent the audience out to our a list of clients and non-clients, and what we've got today are a range of people who are specialised in waste management and managing their waste management services, but also we've got representatives from customer services sections within the local authority. So we've kind of got the people who are providing the services, and representatives of people who are dealing with the public face to face, kind of the interaction of what the services are, how they're helping people, or and their queries. So we've got quite a nice kind of balance, I think, of people to get engaged in what you've got to say. What I thought I would do very quickly is just to set the scene for you, Jo. I did a piece of work a few years ago with a few clients, and I talked to customer services teams from a range of local authorities, and what we found was that up to 60% of queries and complaints coming across a customer services team across the whole authority, up to 60% of that could be related back to waste and environmental services. So people really like to ring up about their bins. They really like to sort of find out information about what's happening with the service, what's not happening, when things are happening, when they're not happening. So, whether we like it or not, customer services, and I'm from the feedback I'm getting from many people in customer services in local authorities, they would really rather not be dealing with so many inquiries about waste. And they often would ask us, is there anything we can do to help help the authorities to pull together and design their services in a sort of more of a straight line, so everyone understands what's going on and how it works, etc. And that would be very helpful to do. But just so there's a lot of people within waste who really have an interest in the public interaction with their service. The other thing to talk about, I think, is that there has been this revolution that's happened over the past few years. The fact I can now go online and I can order a pack of pencils. I can find out when it's going to be delivered. I can sometimes find out who's actually going to be delivering it, when they're going to be delivering it, if they're not going to be delivering it, why they're not going to be delivering it, and when it will be delivered. And whether we like it or not, the online shopping revolution has changed the way people see public service and the way that they see, and their expectations for waste management has it's expanded. Let's say it's certainly increased. They're certainly expecting a higher level of interaction with services. They're expecting pretty much the same questions. When they ring up or when they get in touch, they're expecting that the authority would know, if not their name, their address, and what services were provided to them, whether they were provided, if they weren't provided, when they will be provided, and what they're going to do if they weren't provided. And those kind of things, I think, are fairly basic expectations. That hasn't always been the case, and I think much of that has been driven by this revolution. I'm going to just give you one little example of where I think, and apologies to anyone who's really cracked customer services in their local authority. This isn't a generic state of play, but this is just my experience, and I kind of feel it represents quite a few local authorities and where local authorities are. I recently moved into a new authority area, and I hadn't had my bin picked up for 2 sets of fortnightly cycles, so for 4 weeks, and I tried to get in touch through the phone. I couldn't get in touch through the phone, and I looked at the annual council tax reminder letter, and I saw the fact that I could actually get online and build a relationship with the council online. So did that, told them who I was. I registered. I got a really nice email back saying, thank you very much, Stuart, for registering with the council. What is it in particular you're wanting to find out about? So I said, well, it's about waste. And so I went into the category that said waste management. And so I wrote my email to say, my problem is my waste bin hasn't been emptied for 4 weeks. Can you tell me what's happening? I got a really nice email back saying, really appreciate it. Thank you very much for sending your email. Someone will be dealing with that in due course. And that's quite a few months ago, and I still haven't had that response. And in a few weeks after that, I thought I'd try that again. Perhaps I'd done that wrongly. I'd not clicked the right box. But so I sent the same message off again because it had happened for another 2 weeks. So within 6 weeks, and but we're right on the edge of the authority, and I thought this is fine. So sent off the message. Got a great email saying thanks very much for your message. It's been dealt with, and didn't get any response. So my thought is that and certainly our work with local authorities, we were aware that there's certainly still a disconnect between that sort of front service end of public customer services and the actual services themselves. And I'm sure that's no surprise to you. I'm sure you've kind of got some understanding of that and could give us some other examples of that kind of thing. But I think that generally speaking, and apologies to anyone who's really nailed their whole sort of end-to-end solution within local authorities, but I feel that that's probably, we're still trying to get over that that kind of hurdle of customer services being a thing you do, you think about after your day job. You've got a customer services unit, therefore we do customer services, but actually it doesn't go much further than. Is that a familiar scenario for you?
Okay, so first and foremost, Stuart, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And thank you also to your listeners, because I think the first thing I would actually like to say is I think life is pretty tough at the moment. And, I think that's a really important point. And we are on the back of a number of fairly seismic events. We've heard the use, probably overuse of the word unprecedented, but my goodness, we've kind of, and this is not a political statement, but we've dealt with Brexit, we've then gone through COVID, we then had a war in Europe, which is still ongoing, now an energy crisis, and now a cost of living crisis. And if you think about the public sector, one of its biggest challenges is it's dealing with a whole range of different customers in different life stages, with different economic well-being, with different financials, with different mental health issues, a whole range. So the whole range of different services, and also complexity in terms of customer base. But what your question was around, have we moved? And in the time that I've been at the Institute, I think service overall did start to significantly improve. And those organisations that see service as an end-to-end experience, so from the board or the council all the way through to the front end, and have that joined up, are the ones that are more likely to be able to weather the storm. So really clear customer journey mapping, really clear understanding of where those pain points are, understanding of those handoffs between those. And you're absolutely right, as anyone who's ever heard me speak will know that I talk about, customer experience is not a department or a function. It is a responsibility of everyone. And I remember, and one of your questions you were going to ask me is, well, how did you become interested in customer service? Well, the truth is you are either serving a customer or serving somebody who is serving a customer. Because if you're not, then actually there's probably not much reason why you'd actually be doing those roles. So all of us should be serving somebody who is serving somebody, if that makes sense. So it definitely sits right at the top of the table, right at the top in terms of the leadership of the organisation. And there's a huge element here about making sure that we enable our people. And as you correctly said, there's a huge link between employee engagement and the culture of the organisation and the external customer experience. One thing I would say though, Stuart, and I think this is a really important point, whether you're in the public sector or in retail, the world is, as we said, very challenging. And there are particular challenges at the moment around resource and having enough resource in order for us to be able to execute our plans. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges. Overall, and you mentioned the UK CSI, customer service is not where it needs to be. And to give you a figure, which is back to your point about why it's really important to get it right first time and to try and remove those irritants, not just in terms of the recovery, because as a country, I think we've got much better at what I would call service recovery. So where there is a problem or a complaint, generally we've got a lot better at dealing with that. What we're not so good at is stopping that from happening in the first place. So right first time, and particularly in the public sector, is really, really critical. On average, every month, and our latest UK CSI shows us this, we're spending an eye-watering across the UK £9.2 billion every month rectifying issues and problems that we have created. And that's across the whole of the UK and across a whole range of different industry sectors. That is the size of the NHS budget.
Wow.
So
Yes.
this thing about getting it right first time is really, really important, and understanding the customer journey.
Can I ask you about that? Because I'm guessing that the people on the webinar today will be somewhere in that customer journey, either at the very beginning on the front line taking the calls, or they'll be actually providing the services. Customer service units have been around in local government now for several years. I wanted to ask whether you think there's a kind of continuum of people who just started this journey going through maybe people who've now got a customer services team who man the phones or whatever, going through to a kind of the super customer service experience, and where people within the organization work differently because they get the whole concept of customer. Is there such a continuum, and do you kind of work on that basis? Can you do some analysis on where an organization is on its journey through that?
Sure. And I think there's two things that affects where an organization is on its journey: the leadership, which is what I've mentioned, and also the culture. So organizations that are, and by the way, the customer isn't always right. And I'd like to also, Stuart, if we get time, to talk a bit about Service with Respect, which is a campaign the Institute is actually having and running. But I think if an organization is not siloed, or if it really starts to think about, what is the journey that you and I, whether that's in waste or whether that's in another part of the services or anything, what are the stages in that journey that I am having? Because, and it's not even about tech versus human interface, because for some things, actually, I don't want to talk to somebody. And therefore the tech has a really important role. Back to your point about I want to order something, I want to just kind of check something. So having a really high level integrated tech solution can be absolutely brilliant. However, it's also about choice. And for me, one of the really, really important things is enabling customers to have choice. And the more complex the issue or the problem, the more choice we need to be able to give the customer as part of that. So I'm not sure it's a continuum. I think what I would say is that it's the lens that you're looking through. If you look through this from an external lens back, rather than thinking we're going to use, for example, tech as a way of reducing cost, that should not be the view. The view of using tech is because it should enable a better customer outcome and a better internal outcome. So it's the lens that I would be suggesting people need to look through.
Could I just go back to a kind of fairly fundamental question, which I should have asked earlier, but why does customer services matter? Why
Yeah. So hugely important. And something, when I first came to the Institute, it was something that I was really keen to prove. So it matters for a number of reasons. Firstly, if you run a profit-making organization, we know from all of our research that those organizations that have above average customer satisfaction in their sectors over a 5 to 8 year period, which is back to that point of about not just being a short-term fix, it's not an initiative. So if you can maintain your levels of customer service above average, then you'll have a 10% higher level of profitability, a 5% higher level of revenue, and 114% higher levels of employee productivity. Now, obviously, in this sector, the driver is not about profit, but there are key drivers about being able to be more efficient and more effective. And there are also key drivers, which also link back to better customer service outcomes, around cost and taking cost out. And it's not to remove costs for the sake of removing cost, it's so that we can spend that money on other things which actually would hopefully improve the service experience. So there's huge links as well between customer satisfaction. Those organizations that score in any sector, by the way, above 9s out of 10 or 9 out of 10 will have a 50% higher level trust rating, and trust is really important, and then have a 50% higher level reputational rating. So why this matters, if you like, there's an economic case as to why this matters. So productivity, return in terms of how efficient we are as organizations, trust, loyalty. Again, I know that we have an audience, most of our audience don't have choice, but actually they can be very noisy. If they're not satisfied, they can certainly, go to social media. So absolutely, there is the whole hard metrics. And then secondly, there's something about you and I going to work and doing a good job and feeling that I made a difference today. So I don't know about you, Stuart, but I'd much rather work in an environment where I think, you know what, I moved the dial today. So there's something about recruiting and retaining good people as well. So if you're in a very customer-centric or an organization that culturally encourages development, ideas, ways of improvement, then actually you personally are going to be more fulfilled. So I think there's several ways of looking at why this matters. There's the outcome for the citizen And in public service, we are serving the citizen or the customer. There is the outcome for us as employees. There's the outcome for the organisation. And wider still, Stuart, there's the outcome for UK PLC.
Yes.
You know, and you and I as a taxpayer, and you and I as a voter. So
Yes.
for me, you know, I think there's a huge number of motivations why the service agenda is so critical. And my evidence shows that there's a huge link to that too.
I'm going to ask you in a few minutes to sort of talk about some of the highlights of your annual survey and what some of the best organisations are doing. But I just wanted to ask what you think it ought to feel like on the inside of an organisation who has really nailed, if you excuse the expression, nailed customer services. What is the difference between that and an organisation that's doing its day job as it's always done, and customer services is an add-on?
Okay.
So what's the difference?
Okay. So I think there's a couple of things. I think one of the differences is that you will see probably faster pace in an organisation that is genuinely external reference. That's what I would say, or customer reference. Generally, you will see greater transparency, and we learn from our mistakes, because every organisation, whatever you are doing, will make mistakes. But that opportunity and that constant curiosity, and I call it curiosity about, what if we could nudge that up? Well, that was quite interesting. That was quite good, but I think I could make that more effective. So I think in organisations that are genuinely, and there are many of these as well, by the way, across a whole broad range of industry sectors. So it's not just the private sector. You know, there are lots of really good examples of brilliance in the public sector. But those organisations that are curious, externally referenced, thinking about joining all the dots, if you like, from the end-to-end customer experience, they are more transparent in their communication. They learn from their mistakes. They encourage better dialogue rather than monologue. They test things and fail fast. You know, all of those sorts of kind of attributes. And there is a huge link, and we know this. So for every 1% increase in employee engagement in an organisation, you'll get a 0.45 increase in customer satisfaction. So these things all link. You know, the bottom line is that an organisation that's genuinely customer centric over the longer term in this sector will be more efficient and more effective, because we get it right more times than we get it wrong. Employees will tend to be more engaged because they feel that they're part of that solution, and they feel valued and actually get asked to input and actually can do that in quite an organic way. It doesn't have to be major changes. It's spotting things and thinking, what are we doing like that? You know, well, how can we improve that? And then also overall, the outcomes tend to be better for us as customers. And the other interesting thing I would say in this sector is I do appreciate that, you know, it is complex, as we have said, and, you know, there are regulations and there are rules and there are things that we have to adhere to. And, you know, how we do that and how we navigate some of those things, I think, are also really important. So the job of us as leaders is to try and minimize what I'd call bureaucracy and allow greater freedom for doing the right thing for the organisation and also the customer.
Could I ask you about you know, local authority, as you mentioned earlier on, is often huge organisations with multiple departments actually having very little service relevance to each other. So you might have an education department, social services department, waste and environmental services department, which kind of have little crossover. But is it possible to actually see customer services introduced? Does it need to be introduced across the whole of an organisation, or can it be introduced within? I'm using the word silo, but in a kind of service level, and be successful at that.
I mean, I would argue in the best organisation, the whole service experience goes across all of those. But I also recognise that if you are a customer, you're not necessarily a customer of all of those different departments. So there is also a requirement that actually you've got great customer experiences or service or the ethos of service in every single one of those verticals. So I guess in this situation where you have more complex, you can have it both horizontal and vertical in order to be able to really kind of drive a joined up. But where you've got shared services, where you've got activities like that, and absolutely there's huge opportunities for greater efficiencies too through doing that. But that has to be all the way from shared all the way through the verticals as well. And for me, that's probably one of the most important things. It's about thinking about, so that outside in, that curiosity, the steps that the customer is going through to prevail of any service that you are actually having, whether you are in a private or the public sector.
Could I ask you about your annual customer survey? And I'm trying to think of I realise at times racing along, Jo, and I've not got through most of what I wanted to ask you, but let's get to the sort of the meat of it. Your annual customer survey. I wonder if you could give us an example of your kind of what's the biggest success you've seen of a large organisation transforming itself in terms of customer services.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a big question. I know it is.
But let's just have a look at it. So the UK CSI is what you're talking about, the UK Customer Satisfaction Index. We've been doing that 13 years, and it gives us a really good set of trend data, and it covers across the 13 different industry sectors. What I find really interesting is for the first 10 years, there were regular organisations that were consistently in the top 10. And I could probably, your listeners could probably guess who those are. So those sorts of people that would be regularly in the top 10 would be our likes of our John Lewis or our Amazons or our First Directs, as examples of that. Now, interestingly, since COVID, that's had a bit of a wobble, shall we say. And it's not our usual suspects always that are in the top 10. So when I look at what organisations are doing, and this is a really important thing for me, it's not about a flash in the pan. So it's not about service being seen as an initiative or actually we'll focus on it for the next 6 months, fix the problem, and then it will go away. Hopefully what I've tried to convey, so back to your point about what examples have we got of organisations that have gone from not so good to much, much better over that period of time? I think what you look at is organisations that don't see customer service as an initiative. They look at, they regularly measure. So what does good look like? They regularly measure, they regularly benchmark, and they benchmark outside a sector. Right? So that's some of the, and they will understand where their base starts. So if I think about some of our members, and I may not name them, that have started on this journey, they've looked at, and probably sometimes have started from a very low level, but they understand where they are now. They then benchmark themselves with the best of the best, because it's not okay to be okay if the whole of your bit of the sector is not particularly brilliant. Because as customers, we don't measure the public service of X versus another public service. We measure it against our favourite brands. So we do measure that against Apple or Amazon or John Lewis or whoever our favourite brands might be. So one of the really big things is they look at measuring. Then they look at the whole end-to-end customer journey. So, where are those pain points? And some of this can be, can be very daunting if you're a huge organization. So, eat the elephant in chunks is something I would always say. So how can we fix each of these kind of elements? And which ones are the most painful? So have we asked our customers? Because a lot of the time we assume that that's what it might be. So again, this about not just about measurement, but then asking the customer, and then also trying to test some things. So if we could do this, would that be better than that? So that you are offering choices. Now, for me, as I've already said, the customer isn't always right, and you're not going to be able to do everything that customer wants, but you can give them choice and say, look, these are some options that we have within what we're trying to do at the moment. Does that, you tell me. And then you start to get into much better dialogue with the customer. So again, those organizations that are improving, they have a long-term process to this, and then they just keep doing it again and again and again. So minimizing the biggest things in this sector, so in the public sector, is trying to get it right first time.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest point. Right first time to try and minimize the number of complaints you're getting through the door. And secondly, about choice of channel. So actually, you know, where you possibly can, use technology to take away as much of the back end or the process side of it. However, vulnerable customers, we haven't touched this, you know, or even giving choice to a number of customers. So if you think about your example, Stuart, second time around, it's clearly something was not happening. So wouldn't it have been good if, you know, we just had an instant kind of quick call, got that issue, or phone me over here? We hate chatbots. The reason why we hate chatbots is because we get into a circle of doom. Rather than actually, so if that chatbot helps you for a little while and then works out that actually I'm not getting anywhere, and rather than cutting you off or saying phone this number, it feeds you off to somewhere else. And actually, I'm much more likely to be patient about it. And that's about that journey. And whereas we love apps because apps are simple, they're very easy to use, and actually, so a lot of the time I don't need to talk to somebody. So working out which are the most important things I would say to any of you, working out which part of that customer journey requires human intervention and which parts of the customer journey is fine to deliver that across a systems base.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you a couple of final questions. One is, where can people get hold of this information on the annual sort of status of customer services? And the second thing is, just to say that actually there are a number of local authorities already who are members of your institute, and if you'd say something about membership and some of the benefits of that, and how can local authorities get in touch with you on that?
Brilliant. So first and foremost, go and have a look at our website. We publish freely the UK customer satisfaction. It comes out every 6 months, and that has quite a wealth of data that sits behind that. And we also have other resources too. So
could you give us your website?
Yes, it's www.Institute of Customer Service, but I can give you it's very simple, yes.
Great.
In terms of our members, I think, as I said at the beginning, thank you. That's the first and most important thing to say. Also, I recognise that it is a pretty challenging landscape that we are living in. And the most important thing, we know that where our members engage with a whole range of our products and services, so they utilise the qualifications, they utilise the accreditation, they utilise the business benchmarking, so the measurement, they come along to the events and networks that are all part of the membership. Where they use those things, they get the most out of it. Because we too measure our levels of customer satisfaction, and because you can't be a physician and heal thyself, you have to talk about that, and we don't always get it right, and that's a really important thing to say. So never complacent and never arrogant, but we do know that the more that actually you engage with the products and services, and you try to engage that across all elements, the better the relationship will be. So I will also say, Stuart, if anyone is a member and they don't feel they're utilising their membership to the full extent, then please contact me, because that's our bag and something that we should be addressing. And if you're not a member, then very happy to point you in the right direction.
Jo, thank you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I've really enjoyed our discussion. Really appreciate your time, and thanks for your comments. Thank you very much to all of you who've joined the webinar today, and to say that we'll be circulating the link to the YouTube video of the discussion we've had today, and I'll send through some Jo's contact details and also the Institute's web address, so you can get in touch. I hope that's been interesting. I know I have tried to eat an elephant today, and we've just managed to nibble a bit of one part, but really helpful, Jo. Thanks very much for sort of introducing us to the discussion. Really enjoyable. Thank you.
No problem
Really appreciate
it. Thank you.
Cheers.
You take care now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Your listeners. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.